Hello, and a very warm welcome to this afternoon's live Employers Masterclass session from the Change in Education Group. My name is Amos Madra. I'm a careers advisor here at Change in Education. And in this interview, it's an opportunity for employees to talk to you about the world of work, for you to get an insight into what they do. I've got a very special guest here with me today. Joining me is Joey Cuthbert, Joey, who is the chair of Sport Cheer England, the national governing body for cheerleading in England, and owner of SquadSafe consultancy. Joey's eclectic portfolio career has included work in theatre, dance, and television as a performer, choreographer, and teacher. She's also a former cheerleading athlete, head coach, and program owner who not only managed Team England Para Cheer to their first gold medal at the World Cheerleading Championships, but also contributed to an international level to the development of the sport for disabled athletes. She now chairs the national governing body for cheerleading in England, as well as running a sport-specific safeguarding consultancy and continuing to work as a freelancer across a wide range of sectors. Joey, a very warm welcome to you. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me. And it's a bit of a mad CV. listening to someone read my bio back.
It sounds really interesting. What's a portfolio career?
So a portfolio career is a way of essentially describing a career that has taken lots of twists and turns and includes lots of things. So if you're at school and you're doing your GCSE or your A-level art, you'll be familiar with the idea of a portfolio. You're kind of your big plastic sleeve that you shove all your different bits of artwork in. And that's a bit like what my career's been like, really. It hasn't been straightforward. I didn't come straight out of school, go and do a university degree in a certain subject, go straight into a job in that subject and work my way up within one organisation. It's been a kind of a whirlwind ride of lots of different things that I've shoved in that plastic folder. And all of them have kind of contributed to where I am now, and all of them continue to contribute to where I am now. But yeah, it's not been one straight linear line for sure.
And I think that's really important because for a lot of the students watching, they'll be at the stage where they're thinking about their future, thinking about which directions to take. And you don't always have to have it figured out. And I think, looking at so many different portfolio careers, people have taken various routes and they've tried various things. And it's, I suppose, better that way rather than just a rigid path to one particular career role. Am I right in saying that? What's your experience?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when I was 16, I very much had a particular path I wanted to take. I was very, very driven. I wanted to be a professional dancer. I was training so that I could get myself into a professional training school. That was my ambition. And when I got to my A-levels, I actually dropped A-levels so that I could focus on training and getting into a dance school. And I got into dance school. I went to go and train professionally as a dancer. And I thought that was my career path carved out for me, that's what I was going to do. And then in my second year, I sustained an injury, which meant that was never going to be a career for me. I would never be able to, my ankle was never going to handle continuing that professional training. And so I had to quickly figure out how to pivot. And I genuinely hadn't really considered much else till that point. But what that did do for me was it suddenly made me feel like I had nothing to lose. Like, what the heck, I might as well try this or try that, or why not have a go at this, or someone offers me the opportunity to do that, and I kind of figured that out as I went along. And some of that involved going back in training and doing some other education at one point, and some of it involved going and just trying different jobs and figuring out what my other skill sets were, because I really felt when I injured myself, all I know how to do is dance. Like, I don't think I know how to do anything else. So what am I good for? And all my identity had been wrapped up in this idea that Joey's the dancer, in my group of friends, that was my identity. And suddenly I had that identity ripped away from me. And so trying to figure out who I was without dance. And yeah, it kind of led me to this. And I think you're right, though. It's a great way. It's a great mindset to have, though, to be open to saying, open to possibility and saying yes to opportunity. And that would be my main encouragement, is to go out there and try lots of stuff. I mean, there are loads of jobs. I'm sure lots of people who've been interviewed by you have said this, but there are so many jobs out there that I had no idea even existed when I was in school or college, like whole pathways that, now if I'd maybe done the exploration, more exploration when I was 16, 17, might have been, another path to take. Yeah.
Yeah. How did the cheerleading part come into this whole equation?
So I had a very unconventional path into the sport. So most young people these days, and it is predominantly a youth sport, because there are so many programs available now, they'll probably either do it in school, they'll be part of a school program, or we call it all-star cheer, that they'll go to their local gym, they'll train. Maybe they might start at 7 years old, 8 years old, maybe they start when they're a teenager. My choices after leaving dance was I ended up working in television for a while. And if you watch my Changing Education video you'll hear the story of how that happened. And I ended up working in light entertainment, and I was working on, so I was very early 20s, and I ended up working on a dating show. And the idea of this dating show was that we would come up with exciting dates that the contestants could go on. And we were my job was research and development. So that meant I was part of a team that came up with the ideas for the show. We would research stuff, we would develop the ideas, we would pitch them to our producer, and he would say yes or no. And we were in a research meeting, and one of the guys in there said, "Hey, what about a cheerleading date? It would be hilarious. They could make up cheers for each other. They could do a dance routine. It'd be funny. Oh, Joey, you used to be a dancer. Can you go along to a couple of teams, see what they're like as a secret shopper, like tender class, see what they're like. And if we think one's good, we could use it for the show." Well, I went along to try out a team. I didn't say I was a TV reporter. I just said I was going along. We never ended up using the idea for the show, but they recruited me and asked if I wanted to be on their team. And I fell in love with this sport. I just absolutely fell in love with it. But because I came to it quite late in my 20s, it wasn't very long. I didn't spend very long as a competitor before I actually got into coaching, because a lot of the athletes in it are a lot younger. So when I was an athlete, I was training alongside, I was like early 20s, and I was training alongside 17, 18-year-olds. So I moved into coaching quite quickly from there. But that was my unconventional path in. Most other people will tell you they started when they were like 7 and liked gymnastics, but that was not me.
Isn't that really interesting? That's a fantastic story. And, sometimes it's just, something that you never expected, and you just fell into it and you loved it. And that can happen with anything. So really, for our audience, never be afraid to try something new. Like Joey, you might end up a coach and become the go-to czar for that industry.
Yeah. So and the other thing was that the team that I joined, they were an outreach project for their local community in a part of East London that had a lot of young people that were struggling with education or staying in education. And what I saw happen in that gym was these young people have their aspirations raised. They were going to competitions, they were winning competitions, suddenly realizing opportunity was open to them, and maybe going and being the first person from their family to go to university, or to, take a step and build their own business, because they suddenly felt inspired by the fact, they were national champions or whatever it was. And actually that became, in all the things I do now, the thing that made the most impression on me, that driving impression, was that I realized what I wanted to do was work with and help young people become leaders. But I only got to that point that was my why, my why I do what I do in everything, came from that point, in my early 20s, watching those young people. And that came after the dancing and the dance career, the TV, the everything else. Suddenly then I discovered, oh my God, this is what I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, and it seems to me from a very young age, you've always been very mature. You've been able to reflect on your own life, reflect on your future, you take stock of where things are and where you want to go. You've always made the right decisions, the wise decisions. Has that always been innate within you? Has that been your character? Where does that come from?
I wouldn't necessarily say that I've always made the right decisions necessarily. I don't know. I mean, there have been some jobs that I've taken that I've thought this is not really me. I don't know. I mean, I think I'm not sure, to be honest. I think I took a lot. I took opportunities in school, which kind of helped me feel reflective. So I had a really inspiring teacher when I was. I stayed at the same school I did A levels at the same place that I did my secondary school education. We had a really inspiring deputy head who did lots of things that, I don't know, maybe they happen now in other schools, but at the time when I was at school, this was kind of unheard of. She was like, I'm going to start a media team. If you want to be the person who writes the press releases for the school, I'm going to teach you how to do that. And then you can be the people that do that. Or getting involved in projects and charity weeks at school and things that started to make me think about different roles, different ways I could. But in each of those things, teachers quite often gave you a period of reflection. So, okay, we did this project. What went well? What didn't go well? And starting to build that into my mindset as I went through life, it just became a kind of way of thinking. And, I think sometimes when we're at school, we don't necessarily think about how some of those skills can be transferable, in so many ways, maybe I have, but I think along the way, there's always some bad choices that you make, stupid decisions. I don't know.
You spoke about discovering your why. Can you tell our audience, for those who are not sure what a why is, can you tell them what your why is and how do you discover your why or your purpose?
So there's a fantastic think leader in America. He's actually British, but he lives in America called Simon Sinek, who wrote a book called Know Your Why. He's not exclusive in talking about the idea of knowing your why, but if you want to get a great book on it, or he does a podcast as well, Simon Sinek is the man to go to. And your why is really your reason for doing what you do, but it's not necessarily specific to your job. So my why is I want to grow young people into confident leaders. So that why has gone across lots of different roles. So, I've been a sports coach. I've also been a mentor to young people. Even when I was sort of working in dance education, I started developing projects with dance companies I was working with that are around tracking young people into leadership roles in dance organizations. And it was all about, I want to grow young people into confident leaders. So even in all those different roles, that was my why. And finding your why is really helpful, because when you were talking about that reflecting, like reflection on what you're doing, it helps. It's really useful for helping you discern whether you're making a great choice. Does this job or this opportunity reinforce and support my why? If it doesn't, maybe it's not the right thing. And also we find our why along the way, and maybe sometimes our why changes, but it's a useful tool for being able to discern the choices that you make. So I definitely recommend reading Simon Sinek's book or listening to his podcast, because he talks about it a lot more eloquently than me.
Is your why something that's built within you? Are you born with it, or do you develop it like a muscle?
Oh, what a good question. What a good question. I think you add to it. I think that as I've gone along, there's been more clarity to it, or maybe certain opportunities have kind of reinforced particular aspects of it for me, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, as a young person, I always wanted to be a leader. I've always had something about me that's been like, I want to be the best at whatever I can be. So, when I was younger, I wanted to be the best dancer I could be, or actually I wanted to be a choreographer as well. That was the thing that I wanted to do. Or at school, I did lots of public speaking competitions. And that was I wanted to be as good as I could at speaking out, and I chose subjects that I was passionate about, that kind of felt a bit revolutionary, or kind of social justice subjects and things like that. So there's always been this kind of leadership element to what I've wanted to do, and I saw the opportunities that pushing some of those doors gave me, and I just think, well, those doors should be open to every young person. And some of them are. It's just about mindset. It's about being confident enough, or being encouraged to become confident to push those doors open.
Yeah, definitely. I think, having a good mindset, positive mindset is always important. How important is environment in that kind of situation?
Yeah. Well, I was very lucky. I had a kind of I had this, I guess there's like a kind of a paradigm going on in terms of where I grew up and the type of environment family I grew up with. So I grew up in South London. I went to a state school on a local estate. It was like a bit rough, but I had parents that worked in theatre, and so I saw this kind of other world that was outside, like beyond the manor, and I got the opportunity at a really young age to go and have my eyes open to some stuff that the other young people that I was at school with weren't having their eyes open to. And I was encouraged to do creative things that, I actually remember when I was 17, I went for an interview at a dance school. And one of the questions they asked me in the interview was, what do your parents do for a job? And I said, well, my mum's a musician and my dad's a lighting director. And they went, oh, good. So they're not worried about you going into a job where you're not going to earn much money. like the arts don't necessarily pay you very well, and I think sometimes that's not someone's, like, if you don't have a lot of money in your home situation, financial support, security has to be a driver for you, and sometimes that shuts certain doors because you don't have the resources to be able to explore those opportunities. I was really fortunate. I was so privileged. How many other sort of 7-8-year-olds spend their weekend evenings sat in the dressing room of a theatre, having to be quiet because there's a show going on, and mum and dad didn't have any childcare provision for me. But I was so privileged because I was already seeing all these roles that a lot of the young people that I was at school with would never have dreamt of. So yes, for sure, I had some privilege and I had some support in that. But I also think nowadays there are lots of really amazing organizations that if you want to do something, you can plug into for big pots of funding to help support you. Don't necessarily straight off rule that out. I can't take that career opportunity, or I can't, further education is not necessarily for me because I can't have the funding for it. Push on some more doors, push on some funding doors, and organizations like yourself who are allowing people to have opportunities to see more opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think an interesting question I'd like to ask is, when we think about cheerleading, we think about it as an American sport. We know that it's huge over there, but it's big over here now as well, and right across the world. How big do you think this sport could go? Where do you see the future with cheerleading? And from when you started, where was it to where it is today?
Yeah.
Where is it going?
So I've been involved in the sport for about 17, 18 years now. And when I first started, there were very few what we call programs. So there would be individual teams, maybe a team, there'd be 30 kids, they'd go to a competition. There might be 50, 60 teams at a competition. Now a lot of there are programs. So programs have multiple teams across different, the youth team, the junior team, the senior team, the different divisions. They own their own gyms. There are 89,000 athletes competing across the UK. Those are the ones that we know about who go to competitions, and there are loads of more that are in schools that aren't going to competitions, so we haven't counted them in that way. Last year, cheerleading was accepted as a provisional Olympic membership sport, which means it's now eligible to become an Olympic sport. So every 4 years, when a host nation is selected, the host nation gets to choose some new sports for inclusion. And I feel pretty confident because host nations tend to choose sports they're good at to include. And 2028 is LA. So I feel pretty confident that we're on track to become an Olympic sport in 2028. So it's still a new sport in this country in the sense that it's probably only been going in the UK for about 30 years. But the skill level has just gone exponentially grown over that period of time, especially as we're seeing younger people come through and come onto those senior teams. And our world's teams, our Team England teams at the World Championships are coming back with gold medals. So my ambition for the sport is kind of twofold. One, in my job at the national governing body, is for us to get full recognition from Sport England, because we're a new national governing body. So we have to go through a process with Sport England of making sure our policies and our frameworks in place so that they can fully support us and back us. And that's to get us ready for the Olympics, because I want to be there in 2028. I fully intend to be at the front of that mat when Team GB go out and smash it and bring back a gold. Absolutely. That's my vision for us.
Fantastic. Yeah. And, we're hoping that Sport England will definitely back you all the way with this. It's such an important sport. There's so many teams that you see all over, especially I know that the pandemic might have had an impact. But prior to that, you could see there were so many teams, you just switch on the TV and you'd see programs, in here in the Northwest, would watch a lot of, there'll be a lot of programs on our regional programs with so many teams that would be active and involved in cheerleading, right from under sevens to, bigger age groups. And even connected with a lot of sports teams, Salford City Reds, even Crystal Palace as well is another huge one. So it's definitely got a place, I believe, in the Olympics, and I really do hope, you will be there and representing Team GB in the future. How has the pandemic affected everything?
So the pandemic's been a huge challenge for everyone involved in sport. It's been obviously a challenge for everyone working across all sectors, but if you follow any kind of sport on TV, you'll be aware that there was a period where everything shut down, and then the government said that sports could return, but they had to create what we call return to play guidance documents, which had to be assessed by the government and Public Health England to decide the best way to go, the safest way to go back. So what were all our COVID secure measures that we were going to put in place? What was our kind of different steps to be able to going back to normality, and kind of how they sort of equated to the government's different threat levels for the pandemic. And of course, cheerleading is a really intense contact sport. We're not like tennis where you're on you can play on different sides of the court. If we're lifting people up in the air, you're like literally in each other's faces. So this was a real challenge for us. To create that document and then for it to be approved. And there was one of the things that I want to kind of really tell everybody who's on the call to encourage them to do is, when I said at the beginning of my chat with you that my career from different places has all kind of still connecting into what I do now, absolutely that came together in this moment, because I was like, well, we need medical professionals to be working on this. Who do I know? Who have I met that we can phone up and talk to? Who have I networked with at big sports events, other national governing bodies who I can pick up the phone to and say, hey, can you help us? And then thinking back to my TV career, who do I know at BBC Breakfast that can get me on the sofa and get me shouting about this? Who do I know who works at a radio station that can get us talking about this? Who do I know? And leveraging all of those networks that I've built throughout the course of time. And some of those people will be people that I just, swapped a business card with and said hi to, because I didn't really know why they might be useful to me. But I thought, let's start building a relationship. I see you at an event, I say hi, here's my card, da, 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 da. And then we get to this point in the pandemic where suddenly 89,000 athletes cannot go back. Coaches and gym owners can't carry on their business until we've created this document. And at that point, you just pull every favor you possibly can. But, that is a real skill to start doing that now. Even your friends at school and at college, they're like your network of the future. Some of those networks that I draw on are people I went to secondary school with. They're people who went off and did kind of interesting careers that I stayed in contact with via Facebook, that I'm suddenly like, oh, they would totally be the person to talk to about X or Y, or they would know the person to talk to. And don't think you've got to wait till you're in the world of work to start building that network, or even that your network regarding work has to be more senior people than you. You already have a sphere of influence. You already have a network that you're plugged into at school or college. Start doing that, as well as, networking up, network across too, for sure.
That's absolutely huge. Networking is a vital part in what anybody does today. We are social beings. We want to communicate. And, these days, yes, we can't do it face to face, but you can do it virtually. There's lots of students who've been networking on LinkedIn. They've been very active. And guys, by the way, post on LinkedIn, tag myself, tag the Change in Education group. And Joey, what's your LinkedIn tag so that our students can tag you in as well?
Now you're asking me. I think if you just look up Joey Cuthbert, you'll get you'll find me. I think I'm tagged in a couple of Changing Education posts,
you're
so
in our videos.
You can find me that way for sure. And another really good way to network when you're online, which I found has been super helpful, is Twitter. Because on LinkedIn, you've got to wait for someone to accept your connection for you to start building those connections. But on Twitter, start following the interesting people, contribute to bits of chat underneath. Maybe they won't reply. That's okay. You're still putting your name out there and getting your name into people's, minds. You contribute useful things, and then you can make an ask. Once you've kind of been engaged with someone for a while, then you can, if they've followed you back, you can go into their DMs and say, hey, can you help me with X, Y, and Z? Which was exactly what I did to a Sky Sports journalist when no one would give me any information at 3 a.m. and he seemed to be tweeting. I was like, you're talking to someone in government. Tell me who it is. How do I get that information? And he said, and he obliged. He helped me out. And I never met him before. We've just chatted occasionally on Twitter, so use those networks.
That's absolutely huge. I mean, it's, you don't want to just post and run off, stick
all
around.
About engagement, all about engagement. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really important. Thank you for sharing that. What do you enjoy most about what you do?
I think right this second, there's a couple of things. Well, so when I took on this role at Sporture England, I already knew that safeguarding and child protection was like a really big part of why I wanted to get involved, because it's a sport that wasn't currently regulated at the time when I became involved in the NGB, because the NGB was new. And I was like, oh my God, there's like 89,000 kids without, any kind of like national policies around child protection. And I'd already in various roles. This is where that CV goes like this. I'd already in various roles been involved as a designated safeguarding officer for various organisations and dance companies. I'd been their lead for welfare. I ended up working on a document which ended up being a course, an accredited course it now is. So I teach safeguarding, but specifically for the sport of cheerleading. So looking at all the issues that are within that. And that is a real highlight thing that I'm passionate about and enjoy doing, is that I'm teaching online with coaches, helping make safer environments for the young people in the sport, helping them understand how to create intentional cultures that safeguard and look after the welfare of young people. And what I'm loving is I'm finding within that, my why hasn't gone. It's still about leadership and still about bringing young people through. But I'm discovering this new passion that is like, oh, this is now becoming the hill I will die on, is I'm going to champion how we safeguard young people in this sport. And, you know, in terms of my sort of next steps for my own career, it's a bit of a reflection period for me, because I'm thinking, well, actually, I want to start knocking on the door of our international governing body in the States and being like, hey, I should be coming in, you should be working with me. We need to be doing this piece together. So it's the thing that's exciting for me at the moment is realizing that you're never too old to suddenly start discovering new passions and new sort of directions. And so that's a thing that's happening for me right now.
Wow, that is so inspirational. Thank you. What final words would you like to leave our audience with, and how can they get hold of you?
To give myself some time to think I think if they want to get hold of me, try and find me via the LinkedIn, which through the Changing Education. If you want to find me on Twitter, I'm at Gamper Joanna. So that's GAMPER Joanna, Gamper Joanna. So those are the two ways to get hold of me. And I think the thing that I and it's probably very similar to what I said in the video that I made for you guys earlier, but just take the chances. Someone can only say no. Someone can only ignore your phone call. What have you lost? But how much more do you have to gain? You know, push on the doors. This year for me, so many of my opportunities and networks have come out of one event that I attended. How did I attend that event? I wanted to attend that event, but I couldn't afford to. It was financially prohibitive to me. The cost for a delegate pass was like 500 quid. I didn't have 500 quid. And the board did not have 500 quid to pay for me to attend the event. So I was like, how am I going to attend this event where I know there are all these important people that I want to speak to in sport? So I rang them up. I don't know them. I just found the phone number. I rang them up and I was like, hi, I think you should have me speaking on a panel. And I'm going to tell you why. And here's what's so fantastic about my sport and why it should be contributing. And by the end of the phone conversation, they went, you should be speaking on one of our panels. And I went and spoke on the panel. And then I used that opportunity to network my butt off. And all those contacts are people that we spent the last year having help us get through the pandemic and write our application to the government and all of that business. What would have happened if I had thought, you know what, I don't know how to get to this conference. I don't have the money. I'm too nervous to pick up the phone. They could have just said, you know what, our panels are full, but thank you. It's really interesting to have heard about your sport. And that would have been great. What harm would that have done? But, you know, I ended up speaking on the panel and I'm now actually been invited to be on the steering committee for their 2022 conference. You know, and that all just came out of the fact that I took a chance and went, what's the worst that could happen?
That's incredible.
You know, so just really encouraging your students on the call to, you know, what is the worst that can happen? Go for it. Why not? Why not you? It's got to be someone, right?
That's incredible. That is absolutely incredible. From wanting to attend to being a speaker at the event, it's a complete contrast. That I think that sums it up. There's nothing much else I can add to that. So, guys, if you find yourself in that situation, you've heard what Joey's had to say. You know, take the chances. There's always a way, even though, you know, financially it might be impossible to achieve certain things that you set your mind to. There is a way. And find your why. Joey's why was youth and leadership, and she continues to work hard on it. She continues to support people on it. So this is a great opportunity for you to discover your why. We've created a fantastic environment for you to discover who you are and what you want to do, what you want that purpose to be. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Joey for spending this afternoon with us and sharing her wisdom and expertise. It's been an absolute joy just to hear, your experience and your story, Joey. And guys, continue to engage on LinkedIn. Some of you have already got your questions in for our Futures panel tomorrow. So do get your questions in, post on LinkedIn. I want to know what you guys, what's your thoughts on this interview today with Joey. Get it on LinkedIn, tag Joey in, tag the Change in Education group in the post, tag myself in the post, and the hashtag we're using is Inspire Future Leaders. Would love to know what you guys think.